Welcome to the Real Talk with Megan podcast, where we have candid conversations about the things that matter most. I'm your host, Megan, and we're going to deep dive into the topic of mental health. In a world where we're constantly pressured to perform, achieve, and excel, it's easy to neglect our mental health. But the truth is, mental health is just as important as physical health, and it's time we started treating it as such. Join the conversation as we explore the complexities of mental health issues and speak with experts, advocates, and individuals who have lived through these challenges. Together, we'll work to destigmatize mental health and start conversations. So sit back, grab a cup of coffee, and get ready for a real and raw conversation about mental health on the Real Talk with Megan podcast. Welcome back. Today we're in the studio again with Joni. She's here. I love it when she's here. So thank you for being here.
Absolutely.
And we're going to talk about something that I think especially women know a lot about. And if you saw the title of this podcast episode, it is fake resting. Yeah, we know a lot about that, don't we?
Absolutely. Yes.
So I have a scenario that I wrote down so I wouldn't forget any of it that I'm going to read through. And I just want you to listen to it if you're listening to this podcast right now and see if you have seen yourself in this situation. Because I have. I'm pretty sure that this is probably could have been like a day in my life. So imagine on a Saturday morning, you have nothing to do, which would be awesome, right? You just want to have the whole day just chilling out, maybe with your family, relaxing, finding some rest. But unfortunately, in the back of your mind, you know that there's so many things around your house that need to get done. So you say to yourself, well, I'll just start a load of laundry. After you put the load of laundry in and, your family needs to eat, so you make breakfast for your kids. You also remember that the bathrooms really need to be cleaned because somehow the kids have been spitting their toothpaste into the mirror and not into the sink, because why would you do that? Ding! That's the washer. You finish up the kids' bathroom and walk into the laundry room to move the washed load of towels into the dryer. When you realize that kids need clothes for school next week, so you start a load of clothes. As you take a second to breathe, you look down at your watch and you see it's lunchtime. Well, you planned on making something simple for lunch, so sandwiches it is. The family eats lunch and you clean up the kitchen. Finally, you get to sit down on the couch and relax. Ding! This time, that's the sound coming from the dryer. So you switch the clothes from the washer to the dryer, you fold the towels that are now dry, and you clean up any of the mess that the kids made throughout the day. Again, you look at your watch and you realize, man, it's almost dinner time. Where has the time gone? Have you seen yourself in that situation? The day will fly by when you're supposed to have a resting day. Does this sound familiar to you?
I love it. I think we all can hear ourselves inside that
Oh my
story at some
goodness.
point. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, whether it's that or like you're sitting down and maybe with your family watching TV and then you look over and you're like, "Oh, all those blankets are a mess. I need to fold those right now." Like that has to get done. Like how do we have a restful life in a perfect house, right?
Absolutely. I remember my family used to call me a carpet picker. We would all be sitting down for family, watching. We love a Little House on the Prairie, and I just could stare at the piece of fuzz over there on the carpet. I know some people are thinking OCD, but no, not really. It was from the belief that everything should be perfect and clean and
Mhm.
everything in its own spot before I'm allowed
Yeah.
to sit down, before I'm allowed to rest and take a break.
Yeah. I mean, that's like the whole part of growing up. I know, like in the 90s, early 2000s, I don't know if this was a thing when you grew up, but like me and my husband have talked about this a lot. It's like your mom cleaned the bathroom, but you couldn't use it because your mom just cleaned it. Like, it just, it cracks me up because I'm like, what are you supposed to do? Like,
Yeah, how long is the appropriate wait time
yes,
before, yeah,
before
the
you
the
can jump.
newness wears off of the Clorox? Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So, and I absolutely love this topic.
Mhm.
I love when we began just kind of throwing this out as an idea, because I think this is something that I hear a lot
Mhm.
inside people's stories. Now, it may not be the specific topic of what they've come in to talk about, but
Right.
it's woven into
Mhm.
part of their story as well, where I hear that idea of the shoulds and the gotta.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think a big misconception is resting is only sleeping.
Mhm.
Like, let me go take a nap and I'll rest. And while yes, that can be very beneficial and we all love our naps. Well, I think when you're an adult, when you're a kid, you don't want to take naps.
I never took naps as a kid.
Wish I would
Yeah, I
have.
was a nightmare kid.
But that's not the only way to find rest, and I think there's a bunch of different ways, and like we were saying, like, even in this story is as a woman and as a wife or as a mother, like, we do a lot of that "fake resting," quote, unquote, is where we say we're gonna rest, but yet we do all the things still.
Mhm,
And so that's not finding us the rest. Or at least it's like we feel like we're obligated to do those things. Where
mhm,
some of those things could be restful. Like I know some people that they actually do love like doing the dishes. Like it's crazy, but it's rest for them because like it's a calming act.
mhm.
Me, it's not.
Nope, I've never put those 2 things in the same sentence.
Nope, not at all. But it's that permission piece we've talked about before, like giving yourself permission to rest and like that self-care looks different. So how I find rest and how you find rest, Joni, would be completely different
Mhm,
things. Now, both of us would probably find that rest outside,
mhm.
but mine would look like maybe sitting by a lake or maybe going on a hike, and yours would be going out and doing all the things on the farm.
Absolutely, and
Which, yeah.
I was just thinking about that idea of people when they think about, self-care and
Mhm.
resting, and most of the time people think of, like, bubble baths
Right.
and, pedicures
Mhm.
and massages, 3 things that are just never on my list, ever. That would be anxiety provoking, those things, for me. So, yeah, it's definitely not gonna be on my list of
Mhm.
things for self-care, but I do think it's good that we think about when this idea of resting, understanding, like you said, there's more than just sleep
Mhm.
because we have multiple parts, right? And we've talked about
Yeah.
this, our 5 parts. And this idea of resting our spiritual self or
Yeah.
our mental self or
Mhm.
emotional self, like there are different parts that need rest.
Absolutely.
Yes, sleep is good, and I have a whole soapbox I
Very
can get on
vital.
that. Where because of being the Americans that we are,
Mhm.
we want to go at an 8 or 10 for 18 hours a day,
Yep.
then go into a coma and get back up and hit it right back at 8 or 10 again. So in order to be able to actually do this physiologically, we have to have our caffeine, our
Mhm.
energy drinks, sometimes a drug or a medication or something to be able to get us to the point where we can actually do that. We were never meant to do that.
Mhm.
But yes, so sleep is so important. It was obviously God designed for
Yeah.
us to do that. But there are the things like we talked about, the other things we can do in these areas.
Right.
So let's just throw some of these
Yeah,
out. You want to?
absolutely. Go for it.
The idea of mental rest.
Mhm.
So I have the idea of being creative,
Yeah.
being able to do some type of hobby,
Yeah.
arts, crafts, whatever that hobby might be for you, is an excellent way to be able to just give your mind a break. Getting off of social media.
Ooh, that's
Uh,
a tough one.
so we're not
Uh-huh.
fighting the comparison game.
Ooh, yeah.
Super important to give
Super.
ourselves a mental rest.
Yeah.
What kind of ideas do you have?
Absolutely. I mean, just like trying to find how to get peace of mind. Probably if you're like me, or if you're listening to this podcast, you probably have a racing mind a lot of the times. And you have a lot of things that are going on, and it's hard to like find that stillness almost. So, finding ways that through those hobbies, or through maybe it's sitting down with a cup of coffee and reading a book by like a fireplace, like that sounds wonderful.
Mhm. Or journaling.
Or journaling, like,
Yes.
any way that you can, like, calm your mind,
Mhm.
I think would be a huge one in being able to find that rest mentally,
Mhm.
for sure.
Absolutely. So I think of that relational
Mhm.
piece
Yeah,
that we have. This would be the time alone.
yeah,
For some people, getting rest in this area is solitude.
yeah,
Um,
absolutely. Yeah, and we actually were just in a conference not too long ago, and we heard this quote, and it's something
it's
that stuck with both of us, and I love it, and I had to write it down so I make sure I get it correctly, but it says this: "Isolation is when you put yourself in a cage, but solitude is when you put your distractions in a cage.
It's so rich.
It's
I love
so
it.
good, and I love it because, like, they were also at one point talking about the purposeful distractions, like, we have all these things going on, and I loved that phrase because, like, we purposely put a bunch of distraction in front of us so we don't have to think about certain things,
Yes,
but when we can find that solitude and find that peace and become in stillness, and maybe that's in stillness with your creator, like with God, that your distractions, whether they're purposeful or just life, can be put in that cage and you can find peace within you.
absolutely. There is obviously physical rest is more than sleep.
Yeah.
My kids are going to giggle when they hear me say this, but stretching, they love. They're like, "Wow, your tooth hurts. You need to stretch." But there's some truth to this, and
Yeah.
we do not realize how much tension that we hold in
Mhm.
our body. You don't know it until
Yeah.
you begin to stretch and release some of that, and you're like, "Wow, okay, I didn't
Yeah.
know that was tight." Especially we talked about this before, in your hips, they
Mhm.
will hold a lot of tension there,
Yeah.
especially women. So stretch is a
That's
big
huge.
one. Taking a leisure walk, don't hit it like 90, but taking a leisure walk
Yeah.
outside in the woods.
Mm.
I've heard it said that it's impossible to be in the woods and be in a bad mood at the same time.
Yes. Yeah.
I think it's true.
I think it's true too.
Absolutely. I'm 100% on board with that. And again, let's throw in the good old fashioned massage because there are some people, I'm sure, listening
That's me.
who think that that's awesome,
I
right?
love massages.
So those are some great ideas to think out outside that napping, sleeping
Yeah.
box that I
Right.
think we put this idea of self care and rest
Absolutely.
into. And another piece for that mental rest is practicing acceptance and the intentionality
Mhm.
of I am doing this
Yeah.
to rest,
Right.
because it actually was one of the rhythms that God
Mhm.
put in place. We all know it. Everybody
Yep.
understands it. He rested, right? And
Absolutely.
so it was one of his intentions for us to
Mhm.
be that part of that rhythm.
Yeah.
We work, we rest.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, God rested, Jesus rested. Like you see all the different stories in scriptures that he goes off and goes into that solitude. And that's where we were, talking about that isolation solitude. Like Jesus didn't go and isolate himself, but he was alone, but it was in this solitude piece. It wasn't like when you isolate yourself with your thoughts.
Hmm.
So it's definitely it's how we were created. It's a part of us, and the thing, if you've never experienced this, if you don't take that rest, your body, your mind, all the parts of you will make you take that
Absolutely.
rest
It'll take
one
one
way or
for you.
another.
Yes. That is so true.
So that's a maybe a challenge is to to go out and find that rest before it finds you,
Yes.
for sure.
So there is a term that when it hit me, it was like a boulder whenever it hit
Mm.
me. I thought, wow, I love when people put terms to things,
Yes,
right? For me, it's
absolutely.
like, so good. There's a name for it. So this is responsibility fatigue.
Mm,
Who knew, right? I'm like,
wow.
is that not so?
That's so good.
Good. So great. So this is the idea of just being worn out with the idea of
Mhm.
the shoulds and the gotta, right? And that I
Yeah,
should be doing this, I should be doing that.
yeah.
I shouldn't be sitting here doing this. I can't rest,
Mhm.
but also, even when I'm doing one responsibility, I have five more tabs
Yeah.
open of other responsibilities that I should or could be doing or need to do when I'm done
Mhm.
with this one. So I have all of these tabs open.
Yeah.
And the challenge to that is asking yourself why?
Mhm.
Why should I be doing those things?
Right.
Asking the question, who said?
Mm.
Like, where did I get this idea
Yeah, that's great.
that I should be doing that right now? Or I should be doing this,
Mhm.
I think, I don't know, it's probably been a good 20 some odd run where the idea of the dishes will wait, sit and play with your kids.
Yeah. Oh, that's huge.
That started, that
Mhm.
was a big deal. That was super important. I think that got us on the right track to
Yeah.
be able to ask those questions of like, why am I
Mhm.
feeling that? Why am I? But this is so chronic that I don't think there are many of us who recognize this is exactly what's going on with us. So the
Yeah.
challenge is going to be when we're practicing that solitude, when we're sitting down to
Yeah.
journal, when we ask God to test me and know me, like,
Mhm.
please
Yeah.
help me to understand, please help me to see. and get pen to paper and be able
Mhm.
to jot down and hopefully be able to come to this awareness that, oh my goodness, I am actually struggling with responsibility fatigue.
Yeah.
And again, it's the tabs that are open in the mind
Mhm.
and all of the shoulds that are
Yeah.
there.
No, I love that. I think that's so good. One of the other areas, like those 5 areas we've been talking about, it's a big one for me is the spirituality. And as a pastor, as someone on staff, as someone who's working alongside our discipleship pastor in creating a bunch of resources for all the people that are a part of our church to find like deeper spiritual connections, you get exhausted. Like, you have to be able to find that rest because there's sometimes you're putting all your efforts and everything into that, and then you're not taking time for yourself.
Mm,
Because you're like, well, I've read the scripture because I've put this together and I've made this for these people in this group and this small group. So, like, you feel like you checked off your box of like, I've spent time with God, but in reality, maybe you haven't. And I think there's a lot of people that can fall into this too, and life gets away from us. And so if we can come back to that, finding that rest for your soul
mhm,
is going to be a huge piece of finding your rest.
mhm. And there's a big difference between reading scripture and meditating on it.
Yes.
We were supposed to write it on our hearts and to
Mhm.
meditate on it
Yeah.
day and night. And I think that there's a really important piece. Again, one of those rhythms, right? That's in
Yeah.
there. Really big piece for our benefit.
Mhm.
It's not a task. It's not a responsibility.
Yeah.
It's a benefit.
Yes.
It was put in there as
Mhm.
because I love you, do this,
Yeah.
because this is the benefit of it. So grabbing a scripture and then just meditating on
Mhm.
it throughout the day,
Yeah.
writing it on a stick-it note and then just carrying it with you and just what does that scripture mean? What does it mean for me? To be able to hear that and allow that to soak in is huge. Some of the ones that came to mind, obviously, there are a lot of scriptures on rest.
Yeah.
But I think we all love Matthew 11, "Come to me, all of you who
Mhm.
are weary and heavy burden, and I'll give you rest." I
Yeah.
think we all really love that one. It's one of my favorites. Psalms 4, "In peace I will lie down and sleep, for you alone, Lord, make me dwell in safety." And then Hebrews 4, speaks a little bit about the Sabbath rest and the
Mhm.
importance of it.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. And you speaking on Sabbath rest, like that doesn't necessarily have to be on a Sunday. Finding your own rest. Obviously, I work at a church. Sundays are not super restful. You
Mhm,
don't find that time. So we are challenged here as a staff at First Capital to find other times to find that rest. And so don't feel like just because maybe you do have to work on a Sunday, maybe you do other things, you can find those rests other days and other ways for sure.
absolutely. When we talk about the shoulds, really important that we add that what we're talking about should not come out as a should, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
This is a get to.
Yeah.
This is I can. This is
Mhm.
I'm allowed to. This is I've been invited to. I've been
Yes.
invited to the Sabbath.
Mhm.
I've been invited to experience this,
Yeah.
and this is what happens because of it.
Yeah.
Versus this is what happens when you don't.
Absolutely.
Like we have people running around like, why
Mhm.
do I have all these aches and pains? Why does my body not function like like it's supposed to? Why am I crabby, right? Why am
Yeah.
I, short tempered? Why am I, well, let's talk about how
Mhm.
much rest, again, in all these areas, all these 5 areas,
Yeah.
how much rest you are actually getting in your day or your week.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's you don't have to look at it as like a giant like you have to take the entire day
Hmm.
to do all these 5 things, but I think there's things throughout every day you can do. And I think of like regulating our emotions. And sometimes that's harder than others. Sometimes we need a little help, and sometimes we need to talk to somebody so we can get a little help. But to find ways to figure out how to manage different emotions you have so that those emotions don't manage you can also help you come to a place of rest and find that rest as well.
Yeah. I have a lot of people who talk about, I get my 8 hours of sleep at night, but I still feel X, Y, and Z. And it's like, yeah, because you are wound up in all these other areas that you're carrying around
Mhm.
rocks that you were never put them down.
Yeah,
Stop carrying that around.
absolutely. No, those are all so good. And just in case you didn't catch them, the 5 areas are spiritual, relation, physical, mental, and emotional. I even encourage you, like, maybe even write those 5 down, and you can kind of, like, if you're journaling, put down how you're feeling in each of those areas. And then maybe there's only certain ones that you need to work on. And so that would be able to help you just have like a game plan moving forward. Another practical tip that I've used before in my own life is, so you're going to write down the answer to these 5 questions. And so jot these questions down so you can write them after this podcast, or like pause it each time each question's asked and you can write those down. Just take some time and think through that. But the first one, it's a big question. What is causing me unrest? Now, you can look in those 5 different areas and see what's causing you unrest. Some of those things you're going to know right off the bat because you know what's causing you unrest. But there might be some hidden things, like you were saying, Joni, that are in there that we don't realize until we realize them, right?
Mhm.
So that's the first question. The second one is, what can I do about it? Now, there are some pieces that you can't do anything about it. Like, there's a lot of times you can't change your environment. Like, you can't change your job unless you can. But for the most part, or your situation, there may be diagnosis or something like that that you can't change. But how can you work around that? How can you manage what you're feeling around those things? So that's the second one. And the third one is, when was the last time you prayed?
Mm.
And now this one's for those that are spiritual, that are religious, that want to kind of take a deeper step into that. But it's not just when's the last time you prayed, because you may have just prayed before you listen to this, but it's when is the last time you've prayed for peace for yourself. And sometimes our prayers can be very selfish, like directional to ourself, of like, God, help me with this and help me with this and help me with this. And then, oh yeah, we'll pray for this person because they're sick, and pray, you kind of go through this list. But when's the last time you just sat and say, God, I need peace? He is the peacemaker. He is our ultimate peace. When's the last time you asked him for some of his peace? So
Mm.
that's that third question. The fourth is, who is a part of your support system in your life? Support systems are so important. Whether it's family, friends, therapists, counselors, pastors, like all the different people in your life, there are so many people that are probably there to support you that you may not even realize it.
Mhm.
But who are people you can rely on? And if you don't feel like you have those people, who are people you could ask to rely on? And number 5 is, what brings you joy? Write down the things that bring you joy. Like Joni was talking about earlier, activities that you love to do, maybe with your just by yourself or even with others. Like, I love going kayaking with one of my best friends, and that's a peaceful time because it's just out on the water. So you can find those things, whether it's by yourself or with others, and just things that bring you joy is a huge piece.
Those are great.
Yeah, or things that bring you stillness too, like we were talking about
Mm.
as well. Well, that's all that we had for today. I have loved this conversation, and I'm so excited to hopefully continue this conversation with other people. As you listen to this, email me. My email is linked in this if you want to talk about this, or if you need somebody to talk to, feel free to email me. I can either talk with you or we can get you connected with somebody there as well. So I want to encourage one last thing is, today, find your peace, find your rest, and give yourself permission to rest.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Joni, for being here. I can't wait for the next time you're here.
This has been great. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Real Talk with Megan. Remember, you are not alone. Seeking help is a sign of strength, and taking care of your mental health is just as important as taking care of your physical health. We'll see you next time for more honest conversations.